Hello, this is ABC and welcome to Data Engineering and Infrastructure Community. Our today's topic is
What are the experiences on different hiring around data engineering? Please.
So what I've seen that works the best, apart from a possibility of finding that right hire, is to have the ingrown freshers being trained in that segment itself, and that's also relevant from a point where since it's a very specific to an organization and the way that the organization operates. It's the homegrown analysts, the homegrown engineers, the homegrown folks, which where the hiring actually starts, and they serve as the very concrete example of what should be, and they can be trained as well as they can be the defining factors, like what are the skills that the organization needs as a data engineer, are actually present at the very core of the whenever we see any hire, the benchmark that we generally have in mind is that the analyst that started off in this team 1 year back has more knowledge about the entire data engineering process than the new hire who has come with an expertise in, say, ETL specific domain or SQL specific domain, etc. And then there's a very difficult learning curve as well if it comes to the cloud platforms, etc. But I've seen candidates who have very good cloud background outperforming a lot of things, a lot of other candidates, trying to, and who are able to adjust to the learning curve, to the speed and pace of at which you can sort of deliver, and that would be a good hire for me. But essentially, when we are okay with looking at the lack of resources, we should also be okay with the pace and the learning curve of the individual. And if it's a comfort between the team and the hire, then it's a coexisting learning curve that happens. So while hiring, we look at couple of things: the potential of the pace of learning that they are okay with, the necessary skill set of understanding basics of SQL, basics of data, database, and then everything else can possibly follow. So
So
that's
that's
the
the
bare
bare
minimum
minimum
that
that
we
we
look
look
at.
at.
Okay, so, but I have a counter question to that, Karan. If I ask, is the hiring for freshers and seniors, will it look same? Usually, I know everyone understand. Yeah, it won't be same, but for fresher, that is the bare minimum I will consider is what database understanding SQL is good. But what about senior? Will you expect them to know very heavy on the programming side, or you will say system design side, or mix of little on everything? So how will you choose the senior engineers to move to a data engineer? What kind of skill set you will align with?
Yeah. So the current
Uh,
industry line. Yeah.
yeah, good, good, good. I'll continue later.
Yeah, so the current industrial landscape is actually going by the requirement in the project, right? Or project space itself. When you look at the job descriptions, you look at AWS, you look at Azure, you look at cloud specific experience over time, and by in a very you know a very 3 or 4 lines down, you see Python, SQL coming into picture. But the major point that comes up is the cloud. Where this is the current. Like, what should be the ideal way? Should ideally be, like you said, if the person knows system design to an extent, because the person has been in the industry for a few years, and to a larger extent, database, irrespective of what the platform is, it's going to be uh, it's going to be a better choice at that level as compared to knowing everything a little to a certain extent. Myself, like looking at myself, I've worked only 3 years in data engineering. Before that, I'd worked in analytics and data sciences. So I've always been someone who appreciates someone who's coming new to the space but has a learning curve adjustability. But what I would see in an experienced person would be at least an understanding of system design and databases to be the bare minimum. Again, just with some understanding of cloud concepts would be my go-to person.
Others, yeah, Hitesh, you are saying, please go ahead.
Yeah. So as Karan was mentioning, so that is mostly the stuff in your normal services organization here in India. So that's how stuff works. So basically, they are like, okay, so the architect has decided, okay, so we are going to use. So it is decided we are going to use this cloud. In this cloud, we are going to use this tool. So normally, what they go by is, okay, someone who has experience on this stuff. Uh, that will be a first priority, and the second priority is he has some experience with that cloud, and then you have the basic experience like Spark and Python and SQL. uh, that is the normal stuff if you see in the uh, service oriented companies. Okay? That's how you will see the interviews go on. And how the interview rounds are like, normally they have two technical rounds and one managerial round and one HR round after that. HR round is just for namesake. Just these three rounds are mainly the thing. So mostly the first round are like the actual groundwork engineers who are doing actual groundwork. They take the interview. Then there is a senior technical guy, architect or someone else. Then there is a manager round for the you can say uh, candidate
Cultural
match
fit.
with respect to
Yeah.
company. Yeah, and then there is a HR round just for the salary discussion. That's how the landscape is right now in India for the experienced engineers in service oriented companies. Then you go towards the other spectrum. So the other spectrum is startup spectrum. So there the way they are interviewing is totally different. So how they interview is basically they have at least two rounds of uh, actual coding. So basically, they will have one round of DSA and SQL, and then they will have one takeaway homework sort of thing. Okay, so this is a takeaway problem. You solve this problem. It takes 5 to 6 hours to solve this problem. Then we can. Then they will have another technical discussion on the top of that, which indirectly covers your system design basics and everything. Basically, how you came up with the solution, why you use it, how you use it. Then that's how the normal startup stuff is. Then they're like the tech companies, I would say, or they are like they are not completely startups. They are a sort of a big organization, or they are an old organization, but they are still but they are looking to hire for the data engineer. So mostly in this sort of companies, so most of the stuff is outsourced. Okay, so mostly they are working with the multiple vendors, and the data engineer they are hiring in is basically they are taking the control of the important data that they didn't think earlier it was of the higher importance. Okay, that's how the things are going. So there the round is completely different. So it's basically like they will have one technical round, but most probably it will be the back-end engineers who are sort of acting as a data engineers who will be taking that round. And mostly they were earlier working with the different vendors. Now, yeah, so that's all the thing. So basically that will be there. Then there will be one technical round, most probably with CTO, with their CTO. And then actually in startup as well, it is CTO. The round is most probably with CTO. And then you have one uh, behavior round sort of stuff. That's it. So that's how the right now the ecosystem of interviews is. So anybody having experience of at least 2.5 years in data engineering, okay, so they need to prepare the basic DSA questions in Python and the basic SQL stuff, and whatever stuff you're working on, just brush up on your concepts and what all things you have worked on and what all choices are made. And if you are not aware of why those choices are made, just make sure you're aware of that. That's what my suggestion would be.
Okay, great. Any other points on hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I am here in Eastern Europe. I mean, probably I don't know how much relevant in this meeting, but here they usually ask for the relevant knowledge, not any cloud. So that's a very good thing. So if you understand Hadoop, you should be able to understand any object store. So that is the minimum requirement, and SQL and a take home task. So right away, so you can write anything in like Python, SQL, or Scala, or in JavaScript. I mean, whichever language you prefer, it has to be like complete with unit testing. Uh, it's like a full project. So they give like 7 days time, and you should be able to finish that in a more like a how you implement a full length project. I mean, yeah, with all the necessary components like unit tests are crucial, I would say. Uh, yeah, and some example test data or fabricate some test data or something like that. And then that gives the confidence that if you are motivated to learn new technologies, then I mean, of course, for fresher it's a bit different. They also give some tasks, similar tasks, but they understand the basic. The seniority comes from the task handling level. So how a senior solves the problem and how a junior sees the problem, so is something that they decide and they come up with the salary structure. So that's a bit different. Yeah, so that's it here.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other opinion on or ideas on the hiring of data engineers? Other in this nutshell. Okay, I will share my idea on like how I face and see data engineering hiring. One of them is let's start with fresher. For freshers, it depends which kind of companies you're applying, but let's consider you're applying in startup and product base. Even in US, Europe, the startups, as you say, it works in the same governance level, and they all finally some connection to US value. So that's the baseline. That is a kind of a startup as a fresher you're applying. Most of the time they go with the pattern of HackerRank Codility. They will send you a code, and it will be mostly in the string transformations, recursive programming a bit, but usually they see like you understand, can you manipulate strings, can you do array programming, indexing, so those kind of questions they put, and there's a SQL in those HackerRank Codility. It's mostly a lead code style on a medium easy range. If that happens, then it comes to the marathon of interviews. The marathon of interviews similar to freshers, intermediate, senior, it doesn't matter. But in this marathon of interviews can be 3 to 4. But every round is designed to understand how well you understand a concept. So as a fresher, they will try to understand how well you understand data structures and all. How will, if you say you have some knowledge, so I will say from freshers till 3 years, if you say you have a knowledge of data engineering and you say a word like I know Apache Spark, there is a very high chance on drilling down the concepts of Apache Spark. They won't just ask MapReduce, they will ask how it feels, what is shuffle, why shuffle is hard, what is caching. But they won't expect usually that you will be the master on that, but they will understand that at least you've heard it, you use some tips to improve the optimization on the Spark jobs or Kafka job. In Kafka, one of the most common question is how many partitions you create, how many brokers you have, why do you have so many partitions, what happens if the number of partitions grows. So the questions like that is usually goes. And in next marathon round they will go with and trying to maybe do pair programming with you. But I don't think that programs are hard. They are usually very conceptually easy problems. Try to understand, are you speaking well or not, are you actually reacting a thought to them, are you asking right questions or not. And it is actually true that even if you don't solve, they hire. I know many examples where the candidates didn't solve and they got hired. Then comes the manager around, and Karan mentioned the word culture fit. Culture fit is nowadays quite a lot important for more or less many companies, startups, a bit more startup, or who or like Fang or similar Fang companies, where they really try to understand how well you can gel with the team. Go for a bit senior, like 6 plus. In home code is very controversial. Like they as well know as a company that many candidates just reject it. They say no, we don't have time for 7 days to solve your problem, because the feedbacks are not always good. So you may not get in feedback, you won't even understand what happens. But the tip is just create a Docker image, a template which you always use. Prefer to always your best technology what you like, because if you're liking Scala, there is nothing wrong in Scala. The problem is then you should be a very good in functional programming. That is one of the problem I usually face, where I see that people usually start with Spark and they learn Scala, by the way, but they don't know the foundation of functional programming. There is nothing wrong in that. You just here to get to work, and in your code review things get improved. But if you say Scala, they can go to a monoid and very deep level of Scala, and they can try to find problem on your function, that it is immutable, is there any side effect, what kind of test you wrote, how big is the function is actually doing the in a proper iterative, it is an iterative way of function, or grill a lot on concepts, foundations. Like if you're saying databases, they will go too deep in databases. They can give you in 200 lines of SQL query and say, okay, try to find the answer what this SQL query is doing. And the next course, 3 or 2 round can go on only on system designs. And system designs, now they can ask you a proper, they can give you a proper question like, build Amazon kind of system where you can expect every day more than a million transactions, and you can expect this is a Christmas holiday, so you need to anticipate how much you can grow. Now how will you build it? So you need to sit back and try to understand with the numbers. Okay, 1 million average yearly, monthly, or how? Okay, in Christmas, what kind of spikes you have last year? So in that way, you finally first come up what is the number you're expecting. Then you go on the design, and in the design, it is pure software engineering. Like you will have to start with load balancer, proxy, reverse proxy, Neo4j, backend to a complete detail on distributed systems, and then they can go to CAP theorem and all those things. And that's how that the label they can go in 45 minutes, of course. And then finally the culture fit, again it comes, and the more senior you go, the culture fit will become more and more important, because you may be managing new member entrants, and that's why the things get tricky. And if anybody asks what is the most annoying part of all of them, it is like there is no standard. So what I just said is some of my experience talking with friends, my personal experience, but I can't say is there is any standard on interest. Any other opinion, thought, comment, question on this?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just like to highlight this because I think it is an important point. So a lot of people from our group message me personally and ask how important is data structures. Actually, someone has, I think Naveen Kumar has asked in this chat as well. So data structures for data engineering completely depends on the sort of role you're applying for. So in some organizations, they will not ask for a data structures, and you may not work on data structures in your complete life in those companies, because that is not how they work. But in some organization, it is the bread and butter. So you are basically building a data system. You are basically writing a code which or you're basically writing an application which will be used by the lot of people. So there the data structures comes into the it's really important. But whereas let's suppose if you are working with, let's suppose just say some tools, like let's suppose you are working with Snowflake or something, there you will not use the data structure because you're basically using SQL for your whole time. And since most of the stuff can be done there, so people are not even bothered by it, and they will not ask for that in your interview or anything.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, like you mentioned, it was so in depth that yeah, it depends on the role. Like somebody has said,
True. Okay, good.
How people are like expecting the role. I mean, in a big organization where I had worked in one of the organizations, like there is a lot of software engineering, but there is less of data engineering. So the interview process is so hard, like we mentioned. But if the focus is heavily on data engineering purely and less of software engineering, then it depends. Like the bare minimum things to a level where seniority is expected. So that sort of, I mean, it need not necessarily be you need to know all the streaming or logging process or the system design. So if you are understanding, if you are able to go with the flow, then you should be able to crack it. I mean, you should be able to give that confidence to your person whoever is hiring. That's take at least. Yeah.